A little easier. So Kyle, I want to start with you actually, and the way this panel is going to work, and actually we have 3 panel sessions today, is that as the moderator, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions and ask our panelists to respond. They'll have a few minutes to respond to the issues that we've already shared in advance of the session, and then of course if we do this right, there'll be a time for 1 or 2 questions at the end, even though it's a very short time period. So, Kyle, since the breakup in 1980, I mean, you mentioned that the breakup in 1998, Telebras has been responsible for the National Broadband Initiative, and of course, you've been personally responsible. It's been an area that you've been directly involved in. And SDN, as you've seen so far, and as Daniel mentioned, SDN offers operators significant potential to better monetize the networks, while also reducing costs. It's really the ideal technology in that, or initiative in that sense. The question I have for you is, what benefits can the consumers that you serve expect from the transformation to SDN?
From our perspective, what happens is that we are deploying DWDM IP, IPv6 native network, and that's a big advantage related on the other competitors in Brazil, the companies that were privatized, that has a lot of legacy. We don't have legacy. But anyway, what we are facing now is that mainly due that the ISPs, we have about 4,000 small and medium ISPs in Brazil. And what happens that with the new regulations that we have, this ISP has a big opportunity for content delivery. So what we are facing is to implement a CDN network over our DWDM IP network. And we are facing a big challenge because our networks, till this moment, is not very flexible. So to deploy new services is a tough task for our technicians, our technical people. So we are, and as a president of the company now, looking at the numbers, and what we are happening is that we are losing money because to implement new services it takes at least 6 months, which is not in the benefit of the customers and the benefit of the company. So what we are expecting, and we are working on SDN, is go flexibility and to introduce new services. Time to market, actually.
Okay, great. And again, I'm not surprised by that answer because if you look at a number of operators, and I've actually heard from several in the last couple of months with various different events, time to market and agility are #1 on the list. And actually, if you look at an Infonetics survey that was done by our friend Michael Howard, who I don't believe is here, you would see the same thing. So next, and Daniel, again, I want to just come back to the challenges that you have as the largest incumbent operator in Europe. DT stands to realize significant advantages from the SDN revolution as well. You started to mention how TerraStream is starting to unfold as your proof of concept. However, as a large incumbent operator, there are a number of challenges to migrate to SDN from the existing network. And I think the question I have is just, what are some of the challenges and considerations that are actually underway right now at DT when you think about this daunting challenge of migrating from today's network into the software-defined operator that you mentioned earlier?
Well, that's like the million-dollar question.
That's a billion-dollar question, I think, for you.
I mean, because basically we're betting on SDN as a new control concept, to really replace parts of our old OSS system. And what we're doing is we're doing a proof of concept that we're doing in Croatia because it's a much smaller country, less customers, and gives us more flexibility to test there together with the Croatian telecom to see how we can really migrate in this complex world, because where the problems that we have is in the complexity of our networks, which are extremely complex. And we're learning that daily in the project that we're doing in TerraStream. We're doing that proof of concept. We find out new things that we didn't know wouldn't work or should work, and generally it's only because of our own complexity that we have in the network. In smaller countries, it's easier for us to do that testing, to learn from, that we can, before we go to Germany and it would have any major migrations, that you can learn, a learning phase. And we're still in this learning phase, but what we see is the really biggest obstacle is the complexity in the network and how we're going to reduce it in every country where we are, and we're in, I think, 13 to 15 different countries within Europe, has something unique that's different than somewhere else. Sorry, my telephone keeps ringing. But we have to learn, and we started by learning by doing a pilot project because we said we're not waiting any longer. Like when one colleague said it takes him 6 months to introduce a new product, that's very fast, by the way. We're also going that we want to turn the things that took us months or even years to do and do them in hours or weeks. But to be able to do that, we still have a long road ahead of us, and hopefully this time next year we'll know more from our proof of concepts and our pilots that we'll be doing in different countries in the near future to see what we can, how we can really compete with this. Oh, the other thing that's very important is having the vendors on board that really support us. On the start with TerraStream, it was very difficult to get the people to support us on that because they saw that they would lose revenues. And when we're buying a dumb router and removing all the intelligence, then they can't sell it for what they're selling today. When we said we wanted to have not just your open source, but open stack, and we wanted to have interoperability between 100 gigabit Ethernet, at the start, nobody wanted to support that because they said, oh my God, you're going to order a platform, you can't just order it all from us, and you can order here a box, there a box from whoever, and that means that it would have a major impact, and therefore we can only do it with the support of the vendors, or it won't work either. And at this time, we have vendors supporting us on it, but it was not easy. And we're still fighting on certain areas, but without their support, we're not going to get it done. We want to have plug and play. We want to buy 100 gigabit Ethernet from, how do I know, from Alcatel-Lucent or Huawei or from Cisco, and 10 more from somebody else and plug them into our network and they work, and take the one that's the best price but still adequate quality, yeah, and move on. That's the only way we're going to reduce our cost.
Mm-hmm. And OpenSDN is it opens the door to that, and it's really key to the whole migration strategy, is opening up the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. All right, and that's a good segue also to Zib's, and Zib, what I wanted to ask you about is packet optical convergence. And as an innovative optical networking provider, a long time, MRV has evolved with the industry, and now you offer both the optical and packet solutions and packet optical solutions as well. The SDN is starting to affect the packet optical arena through some activities going on in the Open Networking Foundation to support transport networks by extending OpenFlow and creating new standards, probably by the mid to late part of 2014. And one of my colleagues is actually chairing that activity as well, Lyndon Ogg. So the question I had for you is just, can you just help us understand your vision for packet optical and how it will be shaped by SDN? Not today's vision. I think we understand that. Yeah. It's what does SDN do to the packet optical transport of the future?
I think it was interesting to listen to both service providers, and eventually the keywords that I was hearing is about, you need to turn up new service, you need 6 months. It should go from 6 months to 60 seconds to turn up new service. And it's complex because the legacy telecom mindset is about a lot of complexity processes that exist in OSS, and this is the reason that SDN will be able to gain the momentum, especially if those OSS processes will be changed. I think when we're looking on the network, it's still made from different layers with different departments, by the way. You know, the optical transport department is still some unique entity that is behaving by itself. Some service provider, they're consolidating the IP department and optical department just to make sure that this consolidation of equipment will happen. So it's supposed to create some level of intelligence, and this is all about intelligence is supposed to cross the layers. It's supposed to be like a glue that if IP packet, and this IP packet belongs to video conferencing, is entering the traffic to your network, eventually each device, in a way, will be able to respond accurately and allocate the relevant resources in terms of virtualization. Think about video conferencing. It's suddenly getting IP packet, but the optical devices can right now re-engineer the traffic to the relevant section that are not valid or valid with more bandwidth. So it means that eventually you have awareness of the devices between layers. Abstraction is possible. And if you're looking on the mindset of IT guys, they already understood it. If you take typical IT guy, he understands that VMware can really pull the resources from almost any server. They can just allocate the resources in seconds, and it will be just activated across layer 2, layer 3 devices, and it's actually working. So from the mindset, it's a really radical change that will happen in the telecom business, even though, again, the OSS will be the first fundamental shift that will drive the stuff. OpenFlow as a protocol, the southbound protocol, is imperative, because as soon as we'll have unified language that vendors can talk to or use it in their devices, this is something that will create commonality and change.
And Ziv, I just have to make an observation. It's interesting that, as the optical guy, so to speak, and the vendor, the first thing you brought up was OSS. I would have expected the operators to talk about that because, knowing how much is invested in how to migrate and management, that's going to be one of those factors. And Daniel, I was expecting to hear a little more about, how maybe OSS.
Yeah.
Because it's an OSS transformation is an opportunity, and again, it's going to be a big challenge as well.
ROADMs, think about ROADMs. They're supposed to bring the automation or automated switching and intelligence. Think about GMPLS exists for years. But what happens is, it's not picking up because still the integration to SS is so complex. It's so tight, and we can definitely share thoughts about it for more than 20 minutes.
You and I could probably offline, but right now we won't. So I would like to open this discussion up to the audience, and again, we have two operators, one vendor. We have different perspectives represented. So, are there any questions? And don't be shy. We need somebody to answer the first one. There's a brave person. Okay, go ahead. You can stand.
Oh, that's all right. I guess this session was about OpenFlow. I wondered if anyone would like to comment on Open Daylight as a more practical way to get users involved in defining what really needs to be standardized and allow the openness to be where it needs to be, and then allow differentiation in other areas.
All right, my company's a member of Open Daylight, and I can talk about it and what it is. Open Daylight, for those of you who don't know, it's an open source project. It's actually it's hosted by the Linux Foundation, and what it does, or what it is intended to provide, is a componentized, what we refer to loosely as a control layer framework, which will allow for the kinds of intelligence software packages to run in this control layer in this new SDN world. So Open Daylight in itself is not the SDN controller that you hear about. It is the framework that allows for intelligence software to run in a more common environment. And Open Daylight also has an ability to provide the abstraction that's necessary so that different types of hardware devices can run with a common set of intelligence software. And at the same time, applications can run over this intelligent network without having to have any knowledge of the underlying infrastructure. So I think the short answer to your question is I think Open Daylight just represents one more open source project that's really vital to seeing software-defined networking unfold. It's really about an intersection of use cases that we're hearing about here, standards, and open source. I think that's the new generation of how significant initiatives like this are going to unfold. And so thank you for asking the question, because you'll hear more about Open Daylight. I think a couple of the talks are going to touch upon it as well. So other questions, because we have a little time for sure. Yes?
What are the main services you see as service providers where you can monetize the next couple of years on this application? That's a good question, because what I'm seeing now in our balance in Telebrass and in terms of revenue, that what happens is that we are increasing the bandwidth to our customers, but not increasing the same pace the revenue. So, but basically, what we are selling now is a commodity. So, what we are expecting, we SDN, is to have a more flexible network and to have the possibility to create new services and in a very different pace that we have today. So we expect that the capex we are involved in this will be compensated by the decreasing of the OPEX. The network flexibility, we will have a lot of flexible in terms of the process, internal process of the company. As our colleagues say, we have two different layers, two different parts of the business that you have to be involved. Not only the equipment, the technology, but also the people. People are separate from technology, from people to operations. So we have to integrate these people in a different way that we can create new services because our customers is demanding new services, and you have a different pace for the revenue. I think that's a big opportunity to introduce SDN. And we have an advantage in Telebrass that we start from the greenfield, and we are basically native DWDM and IP in IPv6. So for us is in terms of an advantage for our big competitors in the country. So that we're expecting in terms of increase the revenues. And not only to decrease the OPEX.
Yeah, it's a good question, and at least with several customers, we had discussion about elasticity of services, like bandwidth. Many enterprises came to the service provider and said, listen, we need over the weekend more bandwidth. Why? Because we're doing backups. As an enterprise, we're doing offsite backups. Now, in normal telecom environment, this kind of stuff with OSS requires for you months and more, which means this is a typical simplicity of service that you can sell, but it's not possible today. It's possible, but then you have the radical or very critical OSS processes not allowing this to happen. It's just one of examples that really can be done, but not done today, as part of the packages that sold to those enterprises.
When he mentioned real-time OSS, we're working in the Project TerraStream on that. We'll have our first version in the start of December when we're connecting the 2,000 customers that we want to have on there. We underestimated the complexity, to be quite honest. We thought it would be easier, and our original target was March this year. It just wasn't possible because, like I said, we underestimated the complexity in our network, what I talked about earlier. However, we are working on the real-time OSS. We're working on it in multiple countries with multiple partners together, and we're coming forward. We're seeing a lot of advantages now. We will have the first version up and running, and it won't be the end version, but it will be, as I call it, like a skeleton version. It will be proving that it's working, and we'll be adding new features and everything to it as the year goes on into 2014. But it is possible, and we've seen that it's much, much faster. We're working on the provisioning time, where we have in Germany and other countries that takes really a long time. Just when somebody goes into one of our shops to order something new, they sit there until they go through all those systems. Is 45 minutes gone, yeah? And the other customers already left because we're only talking to one. This is no joke. This is reality, yeah? And this we have in multiple countries. When we're just quicker there and we can push the buttons and say, okay, it's working within 5 minutes and tell your customer, yeah, we can provide you this service in this location until whatever. That's what we really need, because right now it takes such a long time that we even lose customers as they're waiting. I'm not sure if that's by you. And when you go to TerraStream, then you don't need your VDM anymore, but we can talk later. You only need a layer 3, by the way.
Actually, Daniel, one more question just based on the question that was asked. So what are you offering new services, or what services do these Croatian customers?
Basically, that was the big debate that we had in our pilot project right now, working together with our colleagues from Croatia and their marketing team. It's not just us from the technical side, it's also the marketing side. And they're saying if we go in now and we start offering something new that they don't understand as a pilot, the first question is, why do I need it? I get calls from Vodafone, from Deutsche Telekom, from E+, and whatever. They offer me daily some new services that are going to bring a wonder and cheaper. So basically, we scared all the customers these days when we call them and tell them we want to offer them something new, because everybody's been doing that to try to take the customers away. What we're doing right now also, we have the other problem, and that is with the regulators. Before we go into commercial operations, we have to have the things approved. So we have the approval in Croatia from the regulators for the pilot. Before you go into commercial operations, you again have to have approval. That's another stage. So we want to try to offer up to 1 gigabit as a possibility. However, on the start, we're saying we can go 50, 100, 200, 500, the maximum 1 gigabit, and trying to think of new services that we can provide and make them attractive for the customer. But like I said, this is not on the technical side for me. We have to do this together with our marketing.
That's a great answer. I mean, I really appreciate the insights, because you don't think of it. We think of software-defined networking, you can do anything. But that's the problem as well, and I think that's what you're pointing
exactly.
out.
We also said we wanted to offer 1 gigabit as people from the technical side, and marketing said, you're crazy. We're not going to do that. We have to do a different tactic. That's their job. They should know it. And then we try to learn together and do that learning curve together, that we can work together, and they say, okay, but what can I do? And at least within our group, we're improving this communications.
Okay, other questions? There's got to be some questions. I'll have to ask mine in my back pocket if somebody doesn't ask a question. Mine's going to be tougher, I'll tell you right now, and that is, we know there's compelling benefits, no question. We know that also we're starting to see some trial activity and certainly a lot more interest, especially for the operators. I was just going to ask you to maybe look ahead and give us some indication of when do you think these services might be available on the mainstream network. I mean, is this 3 years? Is it 5 years? I mean, it's probably not 1 year, but I'm just trying to get a sense of if that's even something you could predict right now. Well, it's probably easy for Carl.
Tough question, but Daniel, you can answer better. We are developing in Brazil the first experience with 2 vendors. So, and we made some experience. We have a network we have a lab with a reference network. So we are now testing in our reference network. And it's a concept proof. I don't know, I really don't know. I would like to be the next year. Okay, that's from the management perspective, that's as soon as possible. But I think it will take maybe at least 3 years to have in our network. Take into account that a network is not, we don't have a legacy, so that's a big advantage for us. So, but anyway, I think that's my feeling, at least 3 years. But I would like to get in that 1-2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think depends on which one of our countries we're looking at. As the DT group, when we take a look at Germany, we have to think about what we call our IP transformation. And the German network is extremely complicated. We have IP transformation going on where we have to get rid of our old PSTN and SDH and everything. And these plans and strategy we already have and we're working on. Yeah, this is also a part of it, because IP transformation, going to an all IP world. This, let's say in Germany, definitely will not be an easy task, but they're working on it and doing an excellent job, the colleagues there. With their times and dates, I'm not going to mention. Yeah. for strategical reasons, we shouldn't mention certain things like that. It's moving. It's progressing very good. When I take a look at Europe, it's also IP transformation. Well, we have it separated: IP transformation Europe, IP transformation Germany. European countries are going much faster because they're much smaller, yeah, and much easier to get rid of all the old legacy equipment what you don't have. That I would stay with my colleague here in the next 3 to 5 years in some of the smaller European countries, yeah. We'll see it. We'll see big changes coming up also, I'm sure, in Germany as we're moving on and progressing, because we're always working together. We're one company. However, it's not easy to really tag it down on a date at this time. Yeah?
Well, I wasn't looking for the month. A couple-year time frame would be enough.
But think about ATM. I heard, 15 years ago that we're getting rid of it? We still have it in our network in some places, yeah? And that was 15 years ago. It should have been gone. So, and they also gave a year. Yeah? So.
ISDN is still used.
Lease lines, ISDN, yeah, exactly.
Did we not develop it? Was it not from us? Yeah. That's why TerraStream's also developed in Germany, so you guys will have it also in the next 20 years.
Other questions? We have time for one more. Renee, go ahead. Oh.
I'm just trying to get a sense from you, how different or how similar to Amazon Web Services AWS is it? Does it provide the features, or like? I'm not asking you to compare and contrast feature by feature, but just at a high level, how are you different?
To be quite honest, we had Facebook and Google get in contact with us. We wanted to see how our TerraStream is working. So they're coming to us, so that means we're doing something different. Yeah? We're really building a big dumb pipe. We call it the horseshoe, with R1 and R2 routers, and putting all the intelligence only in the data center that is a part of the network. Yeah? We're moving it to the IT. This is a lot different because it's, compared to Amazon and us, we're really a native IPv6 network. Yeah? Everything is IPv6. We're doing IPTV, video, everything over IPv6. Anything with IPv4 or anything else is in the data center. We're already getting converted before it goes over the network. This is really different and disruptive thinking compared to Amazon in one way. However, they're all interested in what we're doing now since it worked and we had the press releases. There were some of them that didn't believe us on the start, to be quite honest. So it is similar in one way to say the intelligence in the data center, but at the same time we went, let's say, one step farther and tried to reduce the cost of the hardware and saying that we really don't want any intelligence in our router whatsoever, that we want really just a dumb network element, nothing else. We want a big water pipe that is so big, regardless of what happens, we'll never meet our maximum capacity, which makes it a little bit expensive at the start, but when you can build up a European-wide network like that, you'll reduce the cost dramatically.
I'm sure you're another group of it, right?
But it was interesting that you mentioned, because Google and Facebook really did get in contact with us.
All right. Well, in that case, I think we're at our lunch break, and